In addition to this, because this is such a large and exciting project that the public is very interested in, we've embarked on a full EIS process for this project, and we will have a public scoping meeting on April 8th. The draft scope of work for the EIS is available on the Parks Department website, and I believe we shared a copy with you to the board office as well, but if not, we'll make sure that we get that to you. The overall schedule for the project, if all goes well, we aim to start construction in the summer of 2026. Construction will last approximately 3 years. Then once the building construction is complete, the landscape work will begin with a target reopening date of 2030. So while the landscape work is happening, we will be frantically reinstalling the wing with art so that we can open everything at the same time. As I think many of you know, this project has been a long time in the making, and it directly supports our mission as well as aims to enhance and improve the area of the park surrounding the southwest corner of the museum. We believe that it's critical to our future as an institution, and we're really grateful to the Parks Department and Central Park Conservancy for their collaboration on the landscape surrounding the wing. We can go to the next slide, please. We have engaged with an incredibly talented design team for this project, 3 of whom are with us tonight. As with our collection of art, we're charged with caring for and adding to the Met's collection of buildings with design partners that are aligned with our mission. So for the Met, the selection of Frida Escobedo's studio as the design architect for the project is a continuation of the legacy of selecting innovative and contemporary architects of their time to add to the Met's collection of architecture. We're joined tonight by Frida Escobedo. In addition, we are joined by Richard Southwick, partner at Beyer Blinder Bell Architects and Planners, who are the executive architects of the project, and they're known for their work on landmark buildings throughout New York City and globally. And of course, the Met is not only a landmark within itself, but sits within the work of art and landmark that is Central Park. So we are also joined tonight by the Central Park Conservancy, who are the landscape architects for the park area surrounding the wing. Nick Koster, Vice President of Design at CPC, will present the landscape. We can go to the next slide, please. We are grateful for your time, and we're going to move as quickly as we can. So I know it's late and you're volunteering your time, so we will try to get through this as fast, but we also want to make sure we share all the information that we'll be submitting to Landmarks with you. So I will present an overview of why the Met is doing the project in the first place. Then I'll hand it off to Richard Southwick to discuss the history and current conditions. Then Frida Escobedo, who will walk you through the proposed building design. Then Nick Koster will describe the landscape architecture. And then at the end, we'll have views that show all of these things combined from different parts of the park. We're going to try for 35 to 40 minutes for the whole thing. So we've been slightly longer than that, but we'll see if we can get through it quickly tonight. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Met has one of the finest collections of modern and contemporary art in the world. I think a lot of you know this, but many of our visitors do not. Our existing wing is difficult to find, it's difficult to circulate through, and only a fraction of its square footage is used for the display of art. We're embarking on this project to provide appropriate gallery space to display our collection. This includes allowing for a variety of galleries, size, and quantity of spaces. Accessibility and sustainability are part of all of our work at the Met, and this project will greatly improve the experience for our visitors, both in how they enter the wing and circulate through it. We will also be able to dramatically reduce our energy usage at this corner of the museum by replacing the failing building envelope and all of its mechanical systems. And Richard will describe that a bit later on. This work combined with the new landscape will enhance and improve the relationship of the museum and the park. Our goal is to benefit both the park goer and the museum goer. And it will also provide a new contemporary addition to the Met's collection of buildings that reflects the universal nature of the Met's collection and is appropriate to its location within Central Park. Next slide, please. The most important why is our mission. This is why we do everything at the Met. The Met collects, studies, conserves, and presents significant works of art across time and culture in order to connect all people to creativity, knowledge, ideas, and one another. All the artists on this slide are in the Met's collection and represent a diversity of critical voices of the 20th and 21st century. These artists, as well as our collection of 20th and 21st century art, traces the emergence of New York as a cultural capital in the world, one that will continue to evolve and change, and it's a story of New York. In fact, some of the Met's founding trustees were contemporary artists themselves. We look forward to sharing this project with you tonight, and with that, I will hand it over to Richard Southwick.
Thank you, Brett. The red box, upper left corner, is the project site. We will be calling it LAW throughout the presentation, but that's shorthand for the Lila Atchison Wallace Wing. Next. The new building will be built precisely on the site of the existing LAW, and will in fact be using the existing foundation and the parking level, which will be below the new construction. We're going to have a two-part presentation today. Frida and I will be talking about the Tang Wing and the architecture and the context, and then Nick Coster will be talking about the restored landscape. Next slide, please. Next, I'll talk about the evolution of the Met. Next slide. The Met is tucked into a corner between two original reservoirs. The site was selected by Frederick Law Olmsted in 1872, and there was a early master plan in 1880 by Fox and Mold, and only a small portion of that was built that you see in the red box, and that's the current A wing. Next, please. And over the years, a number of similar types of master plans were developed by some of the leading architects of the time: Richard Morris Hunt in 1895, McKimney to White, 1906. But in all cases, just a small fraction of the master plans are ever executed. Next, please. And as the Met was developing its master plans, it was actually expanding and adding new buildings to the overall campus. And each of these buildings expressed the architecture of the time, from a Victorian to late modern and many styles in between. Next, please. And the Met is really a living institution. It needs to change to meet current program needs. For example, the McKimney and White Library and auditoriums are both removed for the Watson Library that we know now and the Grace Rainey Rogers Auditorium. And you can see the expansion of both the space for books and the number of seats. Probably the most significant change was the front steps. Richard Morris Hunt designed these originally when the visitation was about 1 million persons a year. When Kevin Roach designed the new steps, the visitation was almost 5 million. Next. Landmarks really recognize this. You can see their quote from the designation report: one of the most notable monumental structures designed by eminent architects and reflecting diverse architectural styles. They stated that that was really an asset to the city. Next, please. This is the state of the Met when it was designated in 1967. Parking lots north and south, the main entrance on Fifth Avenue, and then a secondary entrance by the large parking lot to the south in the park. Next, please. I want to talk about the Roach-Dinkeloo Master Plan because it, in fact, is kind of the driving force of what we are working with and working against. Next, please. Kevin Roach was hired in 1967 to do a master plan for the Met. This is about the time that the Met was designated by landmarks, and the Met was also celebrating its centennial. And they were looking at the future and vision with Kevin Roach. He was a up-and-coming architect at the time. Adolf Huxtable talked about his Oakland Museum that was being completed as being a potential breakthrough in museum design. Next, please. A little bit closer to home, Kevin Roach was also finishing the Ford Foundation. Again, another great integration of landscape and building form. Thomas Hoving, the director of the Met at the time, had known about these two works and invited Roach to come in to interview for the master plan. And he was hired and spent the next 3 to 4 years putting the plan together. Next. And the plan consists of a number of major planning concepts. It was to complete the overall footprint, alternating blocks of limestone and glass volumes. Visitor circulation was rather convoluted, so we improved and clarified that. Utilized daylight as a way to find destinations within the museum, and also wanted to enhance the relationship to Central Park. Next, please. And over the next 20 years, the master plan was built out from the Lehman Wing in 1975, to the Petrie Court in 1991. And the site that we're looking at, LAW, was completed in 1987. Interestingly, never planned for modern and contemporary, but as an extension of the European art department. Next, please. This is an overlay of the three major master plans. The heavy red line is Kevin Roach's, which basically follows form, but is slightly smaller than the McKinley to Whited, or just more Richard Morris Hunt master plans that preceded it. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the current LAW wing, what works well, and more importantly, what doesn't work for the Met. Next. These are four views of the southwest corner of the building. Large, expansive limestone walls, very little relationship to Central Park itself. Next. It's interesting to compare the American wing, which is on the northwest corner, to the LAW wing on the southwest corner. They are essentially identical from the exterior, but the American wing was very carefully programmed. It was opened up in anticipation of the American bicentennial and had a number of small rooms, period rooms alike. LAW again was originally programmed for European art and was a program that's really put together not as accommodating for the type of artwork required for that, for the modern contemporary wing. Next, please. These are two sections. If you look at the American wing on the right-hand side, the brown color is the permanent collection galleries. A very high percentage of the space was dedicated to the galleries. If you look at the LAW, it's really a mashup of a lot of different uses, a much smaller percentage of exhibition space. There's parking, back of house, offices, public and staff amenities scattered throughout. Next. Kevin Roach understood this, another quote from him. Never got built properly, just got put together in pieces. So he's never very happy with this. Next. We've done a lot of, spent a lot of time analyzing what works or does not work in LAW. It is just not a good building for what the Met needs to display modern and contemporary art. There's not enough gallery space. What there is has mostly low ceiling heights. The highest ceiling heights are actually too tall. Frida will talk about that a bit more later on. The floor loading capacity is 50% less than what would be designed now. And there's west-facing skylights. The exterior shell is not in good shape. There's no real connection to Central Park. Lack of accessibility and excessive energy use. Next, please. So I'm going to talk about just two or three of those, and we have more information if you want in the appendix I can go over. West-facing skylights are just horrible for gallery spaces, just detrimental for the artwork. Therefore, opaque blinds are permanently deployed. There's excessive condensation that's doing a lot of damage to the finishes, and the low wall height is not very conducive for the larger art pieces in this type of collection. Next. Accessibility is one of the major goals of the new project. A large mezzanine is not accessible other than finding a staff person walking approximately 300 feet back and forth to a back of house elevator and then getting back to one of the main floors. This is a goal to try to get this improved. Next, please. Lastly, for excessive energy use, a new building will consume approximately 45% less energy and will, within 10 years, have a lower carbon footprint than what a refurbished LAW would provide. Next. Another quote from Kevin Roach. Growth, flexibility in the future. So I want to set up Frida a description of the new design by really talking about what some of the objectives and goals are. First of all, the new design will occupy the same footprint as the existing wing. It'll be no taller than the adjacent Kravis wing and maintains this overall scale of the building. continues use of limestone in the corner, has much better connections to Central Park and better, very importantly, better accommodates the modern and contemporary collection. As we said, it will be fully accessible and utilize much less energy. It really weaves a new wing into the Roach-Dinklew master plan, utilizing a universal architectural style. And what I find really fascinating is it represents this next chapter in the long time tradition the Met has of engaging prominent contemporary architects. So I'd like to introduce a prominent contemporary architect, Frida Esquido.
Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to walk you through some of the ideas behind the wing. Maybe we can go to the next slide. On this first slide, we see the complexity and the marvel of the museum, which is composed of 21 individual buildings built over the last 100 years. And of course, if we go to the next slide, we can see that on the floor plan, this represents an opportunity because it's almost like we're looking into a medieval town with small plazas and streets and little corners that people can discover. But of course, our wing feels a little bit disconnected. We wanted to tap into the rhythm of the museum and really understand the cadence and the gravitational centers that are spread out through the whole museum. If we go to the next slide, of course, we are proposing our wing within the same footprint as the existing LAW wing. The site has a very particular condition because it's at the crossroads between several important collections, and it would offer opportunities for curatorial connections between collections, and that was part of like the opportunities that we had. The modern and contemporary collection not only connects between these two collections, but also between past and present, different geographies and different timelines. If we can go to the next slide. This is something that we were very interested in from the beginning of our practice at the studio. We have a lot of experience in thinking about the layering of historic references. And this slide shows examples from Mexico, Greece, and here also New York City, where we have this cultural layering and of course, historical layering that is part of the milieu of New York. If we go to the next slide, we see an image of Petrie Court capturing the juxtaposition of both the original Vogue facade and the postmodern Roche facade, which is something that is quite unique to the museum. And another beautiful detail of the museum, which is this cornice of the Beaux-Arts Fifth Avenue facade designed by Richard Morris Hunt, which to me indicates that the Met is never really complete, but always evolving and in a way always becoming. If we can go to the next slide. Part of the inspiration was also to look at the idea of modularity and rhythm as a way of weaving connections, not just metaphorically with this idea of connecting different timelines and different geographies, but also to find inspiration in some of the pieces that are part of the collection of the Met, such as Annie Albers or Jody Archibald, and just to think about like weaving connections in a broader sensibility. If we can go to the next slide. The idea of porosity was also very important to us, the idea of creating connections, but not direct. It's almost like an exchange of information that could be considered like from private to public, from intimate to collective, and also from looking at the landscape, but also having moments of introspection. So the celosia, which is a typology that is, of course, borrowed from Arabic culture and like via Spain and Latin America, became part of our language in the studio. We feel like this is a language that could really incorporate this metaphor for something that allows for a different kind of exchange. If we go to the next slide. This is the first rendering that we're showing the the northwestern corner. And of course, here we can start to see the scale and proportions of the wing and how it's modulated in response to the existing adjacent wings. The new art exhibition terrace is shown on the 4th floor and the landscape garden on the 5th floor that will serve as a new public amenity, offering shaded spaces for reflection, respite, gathering, and education. The 4th and 5th floors will be connected via an exterior stair with a celosia or open lattice wall. completing an interior and exterior circuit that we're planning for the interior space. If we can go to the next slide. Here is just a sequence of views that we have from the park. And of course, we can see here that the opacity of the facade is very present in our wing, but also just looking at how the museum is actually perceived in many different fragments and not as a whole. If we can go to the next slide. We have studied in close detail the alignments that we have with the existing wings. And of course, we're always below the Great Hall Ridge and always looking at the proportions that we have for the Rockefeller wing and the Lamont wing. If we can go to the next slide, that also happens on the west facade. The massing articulation is always considering the Patrick course facade, of course. And if we go to the next slide, we will have these analysis of the visibility of the park and Fifth Avenue, where we can carefully see how we studied the different sidelines. And we wanted to make sure that even though we have additional spaces for galleries, this was always perceived as a smaller mass as possible. If we go to the next slide. Some of the concepts for the Roche-Dinkeloo master plan was to preserve the idea of the corner. And this is something that was also important as part of the design. We want to preserve this idea of a gravitational force that is anchoring the corner and that is framed by these two glazed areas on Rockefeller Wing and Patrick Court. So one consideration that we were looking at was how this idea of porosity could actually anchor that moment, but at the same time give some softness and fluidity and more of a diaphanous feel on the corner. If we can go to the next slide. We're of course, considering the materials. In the McKean-Meaden white, we have Indiana limestone that is sandblasted. And we want to have different textures on the facade so we can really start reflecting the light and the shadows that are projected through the trees. So we're using the same material, just with different finishes depending on the face of the facade, which is something that we will see in the next slide. So you can see here a first visualization of the screen with this texture that is really activating the light and the shadows, and is really playful with the surrounding spaces. It creates a lot of depth. It still holds the corner with a mass, but at the same time it becomes quite light and you can get glimpses of the interior space. We can go to the next slide. Another consideration was, of course, the relationship between the circulation within the museum. So the Roche-Dinkeloo master plan sought to provide complete visitor circulation through loops within each collection that have remained unrealized in our wing, and that's something that we wanted to solve. So our proposal, if we go to the next slide, was to think about how this crossed or periphery that was kind of blocking all of this circulation in the existing condition that was mainly services and vertical circulations could be consolidated into two main cores to really guarantee the easy flow of passengers or visitors, and also to create connections or glimpses to the park that were aligned to some of the central moments with staircases. So if we can go to the next slide, we can see now that the flow is really reestablished with the rest of the museum. We have new gravitational centers that connect to these other plazas, as we were describing it as a medieval town. And if we go to the next slide, of course, this implies that we're opening some of the circulation paths, such as Patrick Court, which would become one of the main connections. You would have an invitation to move upwards in the museum and to be invited to visit some of the other floors. So there's no singular reading, but a multiplicity of experiences that are happening within our wing. If we go to the next slide. Of course, we wanted to make sure that we had the daylight as a wayfinding tool for visual connections to Central Park. This is something that we're very carefully analyzing. If we go to the next slide, we will see how the strategy is attached to these moments of vertical circulation, so we can get glimpses that are filtered through the celosia at some moments, and then some other framed views with galleries that are called rooms with a view that provide different views to Central Park. If we go to the next slide, these are some of the views of these two moments. What with the facade porosity on the south stair gallery, we can see how this celosia is really filtering the views, allowing for some of the sunlight to get filtered, but also some other moments on the northwestern gallery where we have these open views to the parks to establish this relationship between inside and outside. Of course, this doesn't come with no complications. We wanted to establish some continuities that were really important, particularly on the first and second floor, but we also needed to guarantee the adequate heights to present all of the formats that are now in the collection. So we shifted some of the slabs, and this created some opportunities to create diversity of gallery spaces that could accommodate the different formats from prints and photography and more intimate views of smaller pieces to more monumental works of art that could be perceived now with more rhythm. So you can see here the contrast between the programs of the existing wing and how we change it into a more efficient program where the circulation is clarified. The majority of the spaces are now dedicated to gallery spaces. We have a range of heights that really accommodate all of the formats that I was describing earlier. And also we have the possibilities for having more open spaces with the two terraces that we have. If we go to the next slide. This, of course, creates a variety of ceiling heights that range from 8 feet to 22, really ensuring that we have a lot of flexibility for the future and that we will be an institution that remains relevant. We believe that flexibility is not about having just one single height that needs to be subdivided into spaces, but actually to create a diversity of rooms, and that would guarantee that this is really flexible in the future. If we go to the next slide, we will see some of the visualizations of these spaces. The one on the left is indicating a more light-controlled environment, perhaps more suitable for prints and photography. And for example, on the 5th floor, we have some rooms that have very particular views of Manhattan. This is quite a privilege to have as a public space. This is something that people recognize with the Met, and we want to bring it back and to really establish this relationship between the gallery spaces and these very particular and beloved views in Manhattan. If we go to the next slide, we will go into some drawings and details. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are a little bit more technical, but just to give a sense of the materiality of the building, this is really explaining all the types of finishes and the different qualities of the stonework that we will have in the facade. If we go to the next slide, we will see that we were also carefully studying the proportions of these modules, that even though they're repetitive, they actually talk about the human labor that needs to be involved to create a work like this. So we're going from level 1 with 9 feet, which is a little bit more substantial. This is perceived from afar, to some of the pieces that have to do more with the idea of the human hand, because you perceive them closely on the 4th and 5th floor terrace. So there's a reduction of that module, and also these guarantees that the perspective is also forced, making the building appear to be a little bit more on a human scale, as if it was on a single module. If we go to the next slide, we can just go through some of these. These are some of the detailing of the facade. Particularly relevant is the illustration that you have on your top left, where you can see that the articulation of the facade, even though we have some opaque moments, there's a beautiful contrast between positive and negative. So the shadow is always in play, and it works really beautifully with the surrounding spaces and the shadow projected by the trees. Some of the other sections just illustrating some of the detailing of the facade and how we're angling it to really optimize the sun and the light that we're introducing into the space. If we go to the next slide, some of the detailing of the stairs connecting the two terraces. If we can go to the next slide. And also we need to do some work to accommodate construction, shifting some of the loading entrances on Petrie Court. Of course, we're looking at here like the interventions on the right side of the drawing. If we go to the next slide. We can see finally an aerial view of how our wing is integrated into the larger mass of the building. And perhaps from here, we can go to the next slide and I'll pass it on to Nick, who can explain a little bit of the landscape. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rita. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Koster. I'm presenting on behalf of the Central Park Conservancy for the design of the landscape around the future Tang Wing. Wanted to start with the goals for the landscape project, which are enhancing the park user experience through accessibility improvements, refining the landscape quality and character, and improving the park museum interface. Next, please. As with all of the Conservancy's work, we like to understand the history of the landscape in the context of the park. So the plan you see here is a plan of Olmsted and Box's winning design for the Greensward plan. And as shown in this map, it did not have provisions for a large public structure in the park. Next, please. As Richard mentioned and shared earlier, in 1872, Olmsted and Vaux provided guidelines for the addition of the Met Museum in the park within this location. Really picking this location because it was situated between the reservoir wall, two sunken transverse roads that bisect the park, and the Fifth Avenue street edge. Next. As you've seen in the architecture presentation, the museum was added on many times since its founding and establishment, and the park landscape around the museum also continued to evolve with additions and modifications like the obelisk as well as changes to the park circulation. Next. In the 1930s, the relationship of the Met and its surrounding park landscape was significantly altered with the removal of the receiving reservoir. In its place is the Great Lawn, which was created moving that barrier and connecting the park landscape around the Met, really changing vastly the relationship of the park to the museum in this location. Next. However, not all the changes after the creation of the Great Lawn were for the better of the landscape, and in the 1950s, a parking lot was added, replacing the former carriage drop-off. Next. The Roche-Dinkeloo master plan, which we've heard about today, and the museum expansion that was as a result, that really created the extent of the Met footprints in the park that we're very familiar with today. Next. In the 1980s, the New York City Parks Department developed a landscape master plan for the area surrounding the Met. That plan was to address park circulation and planting largely. Some of it was implemented in the 1990s by the Conservancy. One of those acts was moving the playground that you see here in the images closer to the park perimeter. Next. So now we're going to quickly walk through the site as it is today and show you some photos of the existing conditions. Next. So the existing landscape around this wing, it's primarily made up of lawn with a few trees that berm up to the building. Next. There's a pinch point at the corner of the building with a steep slope and fairly compacted lawns. Next. The west side features an evergreen screen that is out of character with other park landscapes. Next. And the loading access that Frida mentioned to the park is not well integrated into the building at the Petrie Court. Next. And there also is from the drive an asphalt path that cuts through the planting and creates a desire line from surrounding landscapes. Next. So as we move through the actual design of the landscape, the views from the adjacent landscapes of the park obviously will be impacted by the project, both the building and the planting. So it's important that we think about this landscape design in all seasons. Next. These are some examples of the landscape character in other areas of the park that we'll be implementing in the new design. Next. Our goal is to really create seasonal interest, add an understory, create defined edges to the lawns, and increase biodiversity with the planting selection. Next. A quick series of diagrams that highlight the landscape design. So one of the big moves is relocating the path, relieving that pinch point that we saw in the photograph, and that the park and the building, creating a better interface between the two of them. This will allow us to create an ADA accessible path, which will create accessibility from Fifth Avenue all the way to the Great Lawn. Next. In addition to relocating the path, it allows for us to really work through and think about regrading this entire area to create a better relationship between how the museum wing meets the park, which also allows us to relocate the loading access away from the edge of the building. Next. In regard to planting restoration, we have 15 design-related tree removals around the building and 2 trees that will be transplanted. As part of the design, we're proposing to plant between 40 and 50 new trees as part of this design. Next. Zooming in addition to the 40 to 50 trees being planted, a diverse understory will be planted around the building, creating a layer of visual interest and habitat that didn't previously exist within this landscape. Next. So I'm going to now walk you through a series of sections around the building from north to south. We're showing the planting design here at 10 to 15 years maturity in all the sections. Next. So this is a section cut at the window that Frida showed you close to the southern corner, and this really highlights the new grading and planting within the area. Next. This is taken further down the western facade, a section cut through at Grey Wacky Arch. Next. And on the southern facade, this is closer to the corner, showing the relocated path moved away from the building, which creates the ADA accessible paths and the planting and grading updates. Next slide, please. So in addition to the typical park planting that you've seen today as a palette, we'll be using a standard parks material palette. That includes asphalt for the paths, settee benches, pipe rail, fence, and one new material that we'll be adding is a reinforced lawn surface for the loading access from the drive instead of an asphalt. And so now I'm going to turn it back to the Met team, and Frida will walk you through the building views.
Thank you, Nick. So here we see a sequence of dots that will indicate the promenade that we will be following with photographs. We can go through this very quickly. If we can go to the next slide, it's before and afters indicating the profile. This is a view from Fifth Avenue. If we can go to the next slide. A view from the West Path. Next slide. Again, Fifth Avenue. Southeast Path, South Path, and then again South Path from another point of view. Cedar Hill Path. Again, another view. And going around the corner, yes, we can see a view from the southwest and from the East Drive. This is also from the East Drive, a frontal view of the facade. And from Cleopatra's Needle. Of course, this is with vegetation in the summer. And the East Drive also, a view more from the north. Next one. And also from the Northwest Path. Right, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask again, before we move to public testimony, if there are folks from either committee that have questions for the applicant. I know there are a lot of us here, and I'm sure we'll have a very lengthy conversation. So people can try to ask specific questions. Feel free, Klari, to kick it off.
Okay, I have a number of questions. If I can just start with the last one, because I don't want to forget it. This was on the landscaping. There was something about reinforced asphalt that looked like fuzzy green steps.
Oh,
Can you
I could
explain
clarify
that?
that. Yeah, so it's not actually reinforced asphalt. It's sort of like a mesh material that has gravel underneath of it, and you're able to plant grass in it. And it's for heavy loading of traffic. So in the images where I was showing the that asphalt path that comes off of the East Drive into the park, the plan is just in that location right now to be using that as a material for any of the trucks that might be coming in for loading, just to help integrate that section into the park landscape and not make it look like a path that's coming off of the drive.
The image made it look like steps. Is that, am I misinterpreting?
Oh,
It's very
yeah,
smart.
it's just going to be fair graded like the park is typically graded. There are no steps.
Next question, in the wing itself, and I believe we all know that the LAW wing is not an interior landmark. Other parts of the museum are, but not that part. Number one, will there be any new elevator?
So
Frida,
yes,
do you-
of course, yes. The circulation cores are going to be reimagined. So we will have two central points of vertical circulation. So there will be new elevators both for the artwork and for visitors.
So
Okay, thanks.
and just to add to that, Frida, we currently have 2 passenger elevators in the wing. We will have 4 passenger elevators in the new wing. So right now, for example, if you're on the 2nd floor and you need an elevator, you have to double all the way back to the east side. And in the new wing, you won't have to do that anymore to go up and down.
Thanks. And I thought I saw briefly on one of the elevations, what looked like a central sort of windy staircase in the new wing. Is there a staircase for people using the new wing? Is there a staircase in the new wing?
I can answer that, Frida. So they're inside the wing, next to each of the 2. So there's two cores, meaning there's 2 zones that have elevators, stairs, bathrooms, all of the amenities. So next to each of the 2 elevators, there's a monumental stair inside. And then the image that you saw on the outside was just a stair that connected the 5th floor terrace to the 4th floor terrace. But there's also elevator access inside between those 2 terraces.
Thanks. 2 more
Yeah.
questions. What is the financing for all of the landscaping that's proposed?
You mean who's paying for it?
Yeah.
The Met.
Okay, thank you.
Not better.
And finally, Linda just mentioned. The last question is that 2 subparts. Is there any either federal funding or federal approval involved in any of this? Because Brett, in your first 5 minutes, I heard probably 25 words that would probably this week disqualify the Met from any federal funding or approval.
Yeah,
Even though
Completely
you're
understand. So the Met is not a federally funded organization, and we are not using federal funding for this project. As of now, this project is entirely donor funded, and we've actually raised all the money to do it. So we're grateful to the many patrons in New York City who are allowing us to do this project with their donations.
nor any federal approvals, I gather.
No. So we need to go through city approvals for the project, but nothing federal.
Thanks very much. That's my questions.
Okay,
I just have a quick one, and I assume the answer is no, but was there consideration given to a secondary museum entrance, park facing, in keeping with like the original design of the museum? I ask because a lot of our folks, because of where we live, access the museum on foot through the park. Just curious about that.
Sure, I can take this one, and then my colleagues in Parks and CPC, if you have anything to add to this. So you may remember actually in earlier iterations of this project, although we never made it this far in earlier iterations. So we're grateful to Frida and team for getting us here. We did look at options for a park entrance. And I think what we learned from this wing is we can't solve all of our problems at this corner of the building, right? We have a lot of challenges as a large institution with entry, with storage, with all the things, right? But this project is really about galleries. And so anything we add to this project, it takes away from gallery space. We also have what Roach designed as an entrance from the park at Petrie Court, and we've never been able to use it. And that's because operationally, it's incredibly challenging for us actually to have an entrance there. And I don't think it's desirable from the park's perspective for us to do that. So, we came to you, I think, I don't know how many months ago now, about the entrance at 83rd. So that's where we're putting the entrance. A lot of our visitors are coming from the subway at 86th Street. So I know it's not great for you. You still have to walk around, but operationally, it's much better for us actually not to have that as part of this project. I don't know if Nick, you have anything to add from your perspective, but from our perspective, that's where we are.
No, nothing to add. Thanks, Brett.
Okay.
All right, just curious.
One quick question, and I don't mean to sound obtuse, but does this require a certain element of demolition of the LAW wing, and then it's a ground up?
Yes.
I mean, it's spectacular. This is so exciting. I'm a member, so I'm really excited. So, and I can wait till 2030. I'm good.
Thank
you.
Yeah. So we are keeping the existing foundation, and
Right.
so we are demolishing what's above the foundation, but keeping the foundation. And actually, that chart that Richard showed earlier, about refurbishment versus rebuilding, there's a lot of embodied energy in the foundation. So keeping the foundation is actually very good for us from a cost perspective and a sustainability perspective. So we're keeping that, but we're demolishing what's above it.
Thank you.
Just briefly, first, I'm following up on my two colleagues to my left because their questions were very similar to what I was thinking. This is just so wonderful and so makes us feel good in New York, especially when there are other issues. Just a few small things, because I was at the Met on the weekend where one could hardly move and get around, and it becomes almost onerous, but though successful, but unpleasant. A couple of small things. In the view, the Petrie Court going down and then ending, you had a view of the restaurant at the park, the way that you walk through. And it was my impression that you were enlarging the eating area considerably. And I thought that it works fairly well now for the snack kind of eating. And at the same time, in that eating part, as you come out, you can look into the park. So I then, at least what I saw, was a much larger eating area, taking in maybe not from, I'm not saying from the Petrie Gallery, but it looked as if it was moving into the Petrie Gallery as we walk through. And I wondered, is it food and you're enhancing that for lots of people? And it changes the experience of the Petrie Court, both walking through. And what I noticed this time, when you got there were open spaces in the Petrie Court where people stood and looked for a while in a rather nice way before getting to the eating. And I found it, is this all going to work as well?
We'd be happy to pull that image back up if that's helpful, and I can describe it, or whatever you all want. I can just verbally describe it too.
Yeah,
so
you go ahead.
I think, and Frida, please jump in if I'm missing anything. But so I think the rendering it's just slightly hard to capture. So we're actually not making any physical changes to Petrie Court or Petrie Court Cafe, other than some interior refurbishment. We're replacing the doors, as Frida described, because actually those doors are just quite old, and this is a good opportunity for us to replace them. And you may see you remember the revolving door that's kind of jutting out into the middle of that eating space. So the big opening that made it look longer and bigger is actually the opening into the new wing. So we're not extending the eating space. That's actually gallery beyond that. And I think it just looked like it was larger. I don't know if anyone else, if Frida, if you have anything to add to that, but we're not actually physically changing the interiors of those spaces in any.
Okay. One other quick question.
Yeah.
In the, let me just think for a second. In the Lehman wing, the access to it and then the way it functions. Usually you have to go down, you walk down, you might be in the medieval, and then you get to the steps to go down with a very, very great change in experience of the art and a very great change of where am I going? Is there an elevator to get down? And how do I then get up? I was there, just so happened, and it looked as if you were doing lots of construction in the Lehman wing. So a lot of the paintings weren't there. So I had the opportunity to sit quietly, and it was as if we were in a resting place. And all I could think of was, where are all the paintings and how do you get up again and will it change? So just a short thing, I was quite struck by how's this going to be working?
Sorry, so the Lehman wing, so I think what you were experiencing was a rotating exhibition. So
right.
It looked like construction, but I think they were just probably changing the exhibition. Lehman wing does have confusing circulation, and that's actually, it's beautiful, but that's a challenge that we have throughout the museum, where there's this different experience sometimes if you are looking for an elevator or for a stair, or for a place to sit. And I think part of our goals for this project is to solve some of those issues where we can in this corner of the museum by making the same experience for everyone. So if you need to walk up a stair or take an elevator, they're right next to each other. You're not going to have trouble finding where those things are. No matter where you are in the wing, you'll be able to have that same experience. And when there's level changes that are small, there'll be ramps so that it won't be confusing in terms of circulation, where to go. And then I think the other thing that Frida's done so successfully that builds on Roach's earlier ideas is about following daylight. So daylight is really a wayfinding tool. Where you see natural light is where stairs, elevators, bathrooms, places to sit, all of those things are. So our hope is also to create some of those spaces of kind of respite and pause throughout the wing, in really nice locations. So I hope that answers the question. But
yes, thank you. There's other things I won't take the time. It's quite wonderful.
Before we take some more questions from the committee, I see we are joined by our esteemed councilwoman. I don't know, Gail, if you have any questions or anything to add. All right, excellent. Daria?
I had two questions. The first one was, I noticed that in the old wing at the very top floor, the design, it has public amenities there. And then in the new Tang Center, it's removed. So I wanted to understand what the public amenities are and why it's removed. Clearly, if it's anything from bathrooms and stuff or commodity, like they're very precious to a lot of visitors. So could you explain what they are and why it was removed and where it may show up?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think you're talking about the fourth floor. I think in this section, so actually the fourth floor of the existing LAW wing is not a public space. It's the patrons lounge and the boardroom. And so this project actually aims to make all floors of the wing public space. So in the existing wing, we're right next to the Kravis wing. I'm sitting in the Kravis wing right now. And so when you go to the dining room, for example, if you've ever been to the dining room at the Met, you take elevators up. It's confusing. You're with staff, me with my lunch all the time. You get off at wrong floors. You get off at the dining room and you're in the Kravis wing, but the kitchen for the dining room is actually in the existing LAW wing. So the fourth floor of LAW is the kitchen, the boardroom, and the patrons lounge. So the patrons lounge is a loved space by our members. So we're working to figure out operational ways or other spaces in the museum that can be used for that purpose, but we are not dedicating permanently spaces in the new wing that aren't open to the public all the time. So it's actually taking a floor that's not open to the public and allowing it to be open to the public. The 5th floor, you can get there right now, but you can only go when the weather's nice. So in July, because it's not enclosed. So that's where our canter roof garden is. So when you go up, when the weather's nice, that's where you see the roof garden commissions currently. But there's nothing else up there, not even bathrooms. So when you're up there, you have to go back down multiple floors to go to the bathroom or to get back to the galleries. The 5th floor in the proposed Tang Wing will have some enclosed gallery space adjacent to outdoor space. And so you'll be able to go up there, experience the views no matter what the weather is. There's a bathroom, there's a place to have a cup of tea or a small sandwich, a small little food offering, and it's all open to the public year round.
Thank you. Yeah. The second question I had is for Nick. So you mentioned that there are trees that are being removed. Can you talk a little bit about why you're removing the trees and then planting new trees in its place? Every single time, it's heartbreaking to hear removing general because they've been there for such a long time. So can you talk about what trees are being removed? Couldn't work with the current trees there.
Yep, absolutely. Sure. So, I think first off, the Conservancy really takes great care in proposing designs that we feel are best for the park's long-term care. So that's, something that we've really looked at for this. With the design that we walked you through for the landscape. So, because of the sort of the new building design, it's going to require a significant amount of regrading around the building to really integrate it with the park. And the trees that we're speaking of, the 13, will be need to removed as a result. So we've been working with the Parks Department on tree restitution. That's something that for any tree that's taken down, there's, X number of new trees that will need to be, put in its place or, paid for. So that's something that we're really working to meet. So we've already planned and we're in our design development right now. We're looking at 40 to 50 trees to be going in. We're also working directly with nurseries right now to find trees of the largest caliper that we can bring in. So that's trees that are of significant size, so that it won't just be little trees within this landscape. So I think we've thought a lot about this and taken a lot of thought and consideration how to make both this landscape really work the best with the new design of the building.
Thank you.
Madge?
My questions are about the celosia. Now, what material will that be made of? Number one. Number two, is there anything else in New York that has this kind of formation? And number three, how do you keep it and the glass behind it clean?
Good question.
Yeah, good.
I can respond to that. So the idea behind the celosia was to represent also some of the architectures that I consider to be classical canons that might not be included yet in the museum. The maintenance question, of course, these are limited segments of the building, and even though we have an articulation of the facade, most of the walls are opaque, so we can really have art walls on the inside. So it's only the sections that you see in front of the stairs that are the celosia. And between the celosia and the glass, we have a space so we can guarantee the maintenance of those spaces. And we're also considering some of the angles on the horizontal lines to guarantee that the debris is not going to be accumulated. So there's a lot of aspects of it. And of course, we're thinking about limestone, which is a material that would age nicely, that will integrate more beautifully to the rest of the museum. The second question, can you remind me that? I forgot the second.
If there's anything in New York that has been done in this fashion, in this style.
Not exactly in this style. We're hoping that
Frida, I can add one thing. It's not exactly the same as Frida's building, but the Edward Durrell Stone House, which is actually it's on 64th, I think.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not exactly the same aesthetic, but it's the same idea of a perforated stone screen with glass behind it.
This is going to have much bigger perforations, won't it? Because that one.
Yeah. It's not going to look the same, but it's so aesthetically it doesn't look the same, and I don't think it actually has the same depth that Frida's describing for cleaning. Our buildings team would never let us get away with that, but but it has the same idea of a kind of stone veil. It's just done very differently, and I think that's from the 50s. So this is
Brad, let me add to that too. Yeah, there's a lot of
Thanks.
Edward Durrell stone buildings. SUNY Albany, which is a very harsh climate, has something similar to this, as does his New Delhi embassy, which has very different climate, but it has been used. I wanted to add to what Frida said. There's a very sophisticated system of rails to be able to get maintenance people up and down and be able to maintain, clean the glass and clean the backside of the stone. So it's a terrific question. We spent an inordinate amount of time trying to figure that out, and I think we've solved it. But thank you for the question.
Clark?
Just following up on that quickly, to be clear, the celosia is outside of the glass, not inside, right? It's outside, okay?
That's correct.
Is it something like the Musem in Marseille that, I don't think it's exactly a brise soleil, but is it a structure with made out of some kind of cementitious material that has holes in it? It sounds like this. It is a sunscreen.
It's actually carved. It's carved limestone, is what it is. It'll be built with the same stone as the rest of the museum, but built up out of different forms.
On the outside of the glass, between it and the glass has to be at least as wide as a person and a rigging of some sort. So you're talking, what, 18 inches out or something like that?
Actually, a little bit wider than that. We're still working out the exact dimension, but 30, 36 inches in that.
Thanks. I have the same questions as Madge and appreciate that she asked them first.
Yeah.
One question, when you think about how the celosia interacts and abuts against the wing directly to the north with the glass panes, is the idea that the celosia will like line up with where the panes of glass are, or are they going to be totally separate to kind of be distinct objects?
They do not align at every little moment because, of course, we have this gradient of going from more massive pieces to something that is a little bit more human at the top. But there was an idea that there was also this conversation between the corner that needed to be a little bit more solid and the grid. So the idea of the grid is very prevalent. And of course, the reflection of the glass is going to help us a lot. So we can create that kind of interaction between the reflection of the two grids, and this almost like a threshold where we can weave these two facades together.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Otherwise, I would suggest that we move on to,
Yeah. Hi. I had a few questions. I'm from the Parks and Environment Committee, so most of my questions are about the relationship of the new building, the proposed building with the park. And I was wondering, first of all, can you go back to the presentation if you could show us some visual where you can compare the height, the proposed height, which is going to be the tallest that it ever has been, to what is the tallest right now? Do you have any visual that shows the comparison of the two?
Yeah, that's perfect. So Frida, I don't know if do you want to just quickly describe this one?
Sure, absolutely. So the maximum height that we have is what you see here as the U-wing machine room, which is the line. Let me try to point it out. I'm not able to annotate right now, but you can see that on the left we have this machine room, and that's our maximum height. And above that we have the Great Hall Ridge. So we're always below that ridge.
So that U-wing height, the pink, is the height of the adjacent wing, the Kravis wing, and the top of the roof of the Tang wing aligns with that. So that's the height change, and you can see the existing outline on the top and the proposed on the bottom.
I was also wondering about over the course of the construction and also before construction starts, what would be the level of disruption to the public visiting the park? Not so much the museum, but the park. Because I'm also curious about where you would do the staging for this project.
Yeah, so maybe I start and then Nick and others from the park, you guys can jump in. So when we did the Rockefeller wing, which is the wing next to this, the Michael C. Rockefeller wing, we had a site compound in the park. I don't know if you saw that. It was a couple of years ago, it was taken down. So it was on the southwest corner and kind of allowed for pedestrian access on the path to remain unchanged. The site compound would be there, plus it would wrap around to kind of where Petrie Court is, but the park paths would remain more or less as is. But we've talked to Central Park Conservancy and the Parks Department, rather than have a sidewalk shed or something like that to protect people on the path, we may temporarily move the path so that the pedestrians can still pass freely, not move, but just it's like a couple feet. We can talk about that and show you that so that pedestrians can pass freely, from Fifth Avenue under Great Wacky without being disrupted by the site compound itself. So I think in terms of the site compound visual, it's very similar to what we had for the Rockefeller wing. It would just wrap actually around the south, that corner. And then in terms of disruption, keeping the existing foundation helps us a lot in terms of we're not we're not doing significant blasting. We're not trying to go down. We are demolishing an existing wing. So we have to work with the Parks Department and the Conservancy to do that in a really appropriate way that's not disruptive to park goers. And we have very good construction manager partners who've worked in these kinds of complicated sites. And we'd be happy, once our logistics are more underway, we're still in design development right now, to come back to you all and kind of walk you through what that would look like and get feedback on that. But there's a lot of planning in place on our side with the Parks Department already and Central Park Conservancy for how we would kind of do the project with a minimal disruption. And then, of course, on our side, on the Met side, we're surrounded by art. So we have to be careful on all four sides. So I don't know, Nick, if you wanted to add anything from your perspective.
Yeah, I think just to maybe reiterate a point that was mentioned at the beginning when Brett was speaking of the overall project. So just in terms of sequencing, the building work will be happening for that multi-year duration, and then once that's complete and the fence goes down for the work to rebuild the wing, Central Park Conservancy will then mobilize and phase the landscape work over the course of, we imagine the work taking less than a year. It's not a very complex landscape project. So, that will be done in a typical way that, seeks to maintain park access and circulation as much as possible during that time.
Yeah, but the trees will be taken down initially, but the planting of the new trees will happen towards the end. Is that
That's correct?
correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't really know about the project that you were just speaking about, but I am very aware. I think everybody here is very aware of the theater that is being renovated, and how that, all the scaffolding and the staging for that has been quite disruptive. So, that's a much smaller project. And a much faster project, but its impact on the users of that area has been significant, whether they're dog walkers, bird watchers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think from the Parks Committee's point of view, we really would want you guys to come back to us, the Conservancy, the Parks Department, and talk in more detail about the landscaping and the impact of the landscaping part of this project on the public, because we're here to advocate for the park and its users.
Yeah, I think that's a very good request, and we can get the construction manager to talk about means and methods. It's something we've done on lots of projects for dust and noise and all those types of inconveniences, but there are ways that they will not only try to mitigate that, but certainly let park users know what's going on. That's very important.
And just to add to that, sorry, hi, this is Sandy Huber. I lead the capital group at the Conservancy for the Delacorte project, and we're happy to come back at the next meeting and kind of walk you through, give you an update of where we're at. It's a bit of a concentration of work because not only do you have the public doing the theater project, we're renovating, we're doing a core and shell restoration of the restroom, and then we're also doing the path work in that area too, trying to get all of those projects to align at the same time. So it is, it's absolutely recognized, it is an inconvenience for park goers in that area, and just trying to move through as fast as we can to get it done and open that back up. And the path working in a phased way to try to create as much access as we can. But, happy to come back and just give an update to everybody of where we're at with that.
Right. And I was just wondering, I realize that there's no master plan at this point. The last one was in the 60s or the 70s that you were mentioning. But, don't you think this kind of sets a certain precedence where right now you're clearly not expanding the footprint into the park, but you're expanding the height? And what would stop maybe like 10 years from now, you guys coming back and wanting to increase that on the other side as well? Like, there doesn't seem to be much zoning within the park. And, I wonder what it means for the view from the Great Lawn, for instance.
So I think, so I think in terms of your question about view from the Great Lawn, I do think we have some views from the Great Lawn of this wing, which we're happy to share with you. If we don't have them in this presentation, we'll certainly get them to you. I think your question about precedent and master planning is the right one. We've been asked it by many, as I'm sure you can imagine. I think what I can answer for is what this generation is doing. I'm the head of capital projects, so I know what projects are coming up and what we're up to. And this is our big project. This is what we're doing this generation. And in terms of the precedent of height, we are actually lower than the height precedent that's been set for our campus, which is the ridge of the Great Hall. We're also aligned with the original Wing A in the park. So the chimneys of that and the peak of that roof are the same height as the Kravis bulkhead. So I think we are making a change at this corner. For sure. We're making a change to meet the needs of this generation, but we have a robust democratic and public process in this city. We can't do anything at the Met without going through every single community board, without going through landmarks, Public Design Commission, DCLA, all the city agencies, and you help us manage the change that we propose. But in the next 20 years, this is our big project. This is what we're doing. And I think most master plans get put on shelves. Kevin Roach had the privilege of finishing one, right? But for us to propose something at the American, we don't have that project on our plan, on our 20-year. There's nothing on our 20-year plan for that wing right now. So that's our approach at this point. I think we feel comfortable in that. And we have a great relationship with the Parks Department and Central Park Conservancy, and a reverence for the fact that we're in a scenic landmark. So,
and are you taking away any acreage from the park at all? I know you've spoken about how you're not actually expanding the footprint.
It's the same foundation.
With that?
No, it's the same foundation.
It's the same.
The same foundation, the same footprint.
Yeah. I would just, in parking, I would just advocate for giving back more to the park. Like, if there's any way that you could actually make, take, I don't know, part of the parking area or something and make it, return it to the park. I would really advocate for that. And also, as part of the Parks and Environment Committee who looks at parks and playgrounds all over our district, one thing that I'm going to recommend is for you guys to look into the possibility of building a couple of public restrooms facing towards the park as part of this project. I know it's kind of a maverick suggestion to make, but that it's been kind of a problem all over the park and in our playgrounds and everywhere. It would be a nice sort of thing to give back to the public as part of the project.
So if I may, Nick actually described something we are actually giving back. The drive that goes to the Elephant Doors of Petrie Court will actually be grassed over. It'll be the engineered turf, and right now it's a paved area. So we will be providing more green space than what presently occurs.
Yeah, I think, and in terms of bathrooms, I think I would let my colleagues at the Parks Department and CPC answer that, because that wouldn't be up to us.
Well, it wouldn't be germane to what you're doing, so.
Question?
Yeah,
I think we should.
And then I think let's hear from the public.
I would echo what Natasha said. It's not obviously in what you presented, but we would love to get some more bathrooms in that area that are accessible from the park. And even if you don't have an entrance to the museum, really would be great if you think about it. But I have one more last question, and that is about the demolition materials from tearing down the LAW wing. One is, are they at all recyclable? And two, how do you schlep them out of there? I hope not by driving them through the park. What's it going to do to Fifth Avenue? Tell us about the demolition aspect.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think I just want to propose this, is that we should come back to you with our construction managers. We're still in design right now. So we need to get through the landmarks process and go through the EIS and draft scope of work environmental review process. So there will be plenty of moments for us to present and comment on this to you. So I don't want it to sound like I'm moving through it quickly. It's just, we don't have all the answers yet. I can say that a few things. Hopefully you all didn't notice that we took the facade off the Michael C. Rockefeller wing and put a new one on, but we just did that. We actually haven't even reopened it. So it's a 200-foot long facade. It's 5 stories high. We took the whole thing off and we put a new one on. And that just happened. So, and we did all of that without disturbing Fifth Avenue. So we have a great relationship with the park. We have set times when we come in through the park drive. We take big materials in and out with the least disruption possible for the public. We have a process in place. We also did that for the ABC Skylights project, which went on for 4 years, where we replaced 4 acres of skylights above our museum. So in terms of level of disruption, I'm confident that we can come up with a plan that is the least disruptive, because we've done it so many times before. I think with the demolition of the material, both Frida's team, Buyer Blinderbelt, and our construction manager are all committed to reusing as much material as possible and being conscious of the fact that we are removing existing material. So where it goes, how it's disposed of, all of that is something that we're working on together. And we'd be very happy to come back to you with all of those plans. And we're still developing them.
Thank you.
It may be worth mentioning, Brett, that we're aiming for LEED Gold on this project, and we will meet all of the New York City Energy Conservation Code requirements with this.
Thanks, Andrea.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to suggest that we move now to public testimony. So if there are folks from the public who would like to speak on this item, given the hour that we're at, I'd ask you to maybe stay to 2 minutes. And if you're interested in speaking, please come up to the table, introduce yourself, and we'll hear from you. Is anyone in the room interested in, please? And then for folks on Zoom, we will be with you shortly.
So far, there's no hands up online, just letting you know.
Yeah. If you want to go wherever you stand at the table, we will hear you.
Yeah, close to the table, and you get that.
Yeah, you can sit here.
You made time for you?
I'll get it.
Okay.
Join the party.
Hello, my name is Guy DeBear, and I was born in New York, and I live 95th Street. And after I was in the Air Force way back in New York City, I've been coming to the Met for 60 years, I guess. And after I finished my career in the medical field and then Department of Education, I became a volunteer and also an artist after my retirement. And but I became a volunteer for 8 years now, and in the visitor's experience. And so it's I'm not a docent, but I'm receive people from all over the world and New York, and it's a great joy. And the thing is, I'm very encouraged and happy to hear about the plans for improved accessibility to the contemporary and the Wang modern wing, because as it is now, as I found myself having to take the security has to be removed from their duties to accompany someone's handicapped to the mezzanine level. And I've had the opportunity to take people up there myself. I was shown how to do it, my own ID in the elevator. And that's going through offices and corridors and it's and to retrace your steps to get out of there. So that's a solution, foreseeable solution is music to our ears. And also the as well as the improved accessibility is essential because the modern art in New York City was at MoMA and the Whitney largely. And that, apart from some limited free access, very limited, the Met says for New York State, New York City residents, is pay as you wish. And that's crucial. I think it's quite vital as far as the mission, the civic duty to make contemporary art visible to the world and the population. I mean, so for young people wanting to, and all generations, for access to these collections are essential as a continuation throughout all the history from different past civilizations and internationally. And I think it's vital and essential. And I think that would be a way to go to continue and to prove on that. And so
thank you.
I would very much endorse encourage the approval of these plans.
Yes, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You're on 95th on the east side or the west side?
West, of course, west.
Are either of you interested in speaking? If there's anyone on Zoom who wants to speak on this application, I would ask that you raise your hand so that our hero of the evening, Jesse, can promote you. It should be at the bottom of your screen. So if there's anyone on Zoom who would like to speak, please raise your hand now.
Onward and upward. Okay.
And if you figure it out later, we'll let you interrupt us.
She said there was no one.
Okay, excellent. So with that, we'll close the public section.
Hold on, Natasha Blakely online raised her hand. Okay. I promoted her just now.
Excellent.
Natasha, you need to accept. Okay, perfect. She's transferring over.
Hello. Okay. Hello.
My name is Natasha Blakely, and I live here on the Upper West Side, and I also volunteer at the Met, and I actually guide highlight tours. And I'm here today to urge your support for the construction of the Tang Wing. And you know, the museum's modern and contemporary art collection is one of the best in the world, but I have to say that the building where it lives is unfortunately neither modern nor contemporary, and it is outdated, and more importantly, it's inaccessible. And like many pointed out, for example, right now, I cannot take people who have mobility challenges to those in wheelchairs or walkers or strollers to see the majority of the collection. And, you know, art should be for everyone. And yet our current space creates barriers, clear barriers, instead of breaking them. So I urge you to support the construction of the Tang Wing and help make art accessible to all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there is anyone else on Zoom, we will interrupt our discussion to hear from them. But for the time being, let's move on. I will note that there are also a couple of letters that we received that are in the drive. My suggestion for this conversation is let's have a conversation about the building first and then talk about the landscaping. I would ask, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm in the room for the building, so I don't think we need to, you know, pile on with, if we're supportive of it. So I would say, setting aside kind of the landscape questions, is there anything is there any reason that people would not want to support this? Is there anything people want to say that they specifically want to put in the resolution? Yeah, Klari?
Well, I would support, if you want me to offer, I will, a resolution on, and I think Brett said at the beginning, she wants two separate resolutions, so you're doing that. To approve as presented. I have one additional thing, though, that is, I guess, a wrinkle or a suggestion, which is it would be great in the interior of this wonderful new publicly accessible and welcoming space to have some places to sit, like some benches. I know last couple of times I was in the Met and wanted to sit, I had to schlep all the way to the American wing just to find a place to perch. And so I strongly encourage some benches in there.
She showed us some benches.
And so I say yes.
Anything else folks want to add about that, about the building? Okay.
Let's call the question.
Let's call the question.
Call the question. So it'll be a resolution that Kay will draft in support of the certificate of appropriateness of this new thing. All in favor?
You want to take both committees together?
I'll just I think we can do that afterwards. Opposed?
I think somebody said you're both.
Yeah.
I count twice.
Yeah. Opposed?
As far as I'm concerned, you've come to more than that.
No opposed, no abstentions.
You know, we have a new puppet member, so do you count?
Did you, sorry.
No, I raised my hand, so.
Oh, okay.
So as long as you counted her vote as well.
So
yes.
did we count?
So we have, for preservation, it's 4-0-0-0. And for parks, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 0, 0, 0, right?
Are you in parks?
Yeah.
That's right. Nice to meet you again.
And they count the public members separately, don't you?
No, for the committee vote, they're the same. So 4-0-0-0, 8-0-0-0. Okay, perfect.
So if they're missing and we don't have a quorum, that's something
3,
else.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
5, 6. No, we're 7.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, I planted Klari. Sorry,
No,
7.
Klari's with us.
Yeah, 7, 0, 0, 0.
Okay. And you mentioned the date of April 22nd for landmarks. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay. Okay, and then for the landscaping section, I personally would say I understand that bathrooms are of interest. I think for a wide variety of reasons, that was very hard to do with the existing foundation, with all sorts of other things. And that part of the park actually has pretty good bathrooms. There's the Ancients Playground, or whatever it's called, which has bathrooms. And then there are also bathrooms by
the Delacorte,
and bathrooms by the Stuart Little sailing pool. That has a better name, I'm sure.
Conservatory water.
Yes, thank you. As a former CPC employee, I should know better. So if there's a lot of support for that, I guess it could go in the resolution, but my hunch is probably less relevant.
I actually don't think it's germane to what they're doing, because we're talking about the specifically the landscaping around the project rather than the facilities.
I think it's germane, but I would not suggest that we condition our approval on the bathrooms. But I have a technical question, Adam, and Madge and the other co-chairs. So an EIS has been initiated and it was part of what we saw on our agenda, et cetera. I'm not quite sure procedurally if we have anything we're supposed to be doing or saying about the EIS part tonight. I think we have a role in it later.
Yeah.
But that's just a piece that we'll deal with later. Is that right? Tonight we are just from an LPC and what will turn out to be a PDC, if they've changed the name of that, haven't they? Point of view,
the EIS
for
scoping
the
meeting.
landscape.
The EIS scoping meeting is later.
Right,
and that is something
not
that
part of that. Okay.
that's correct. We can participate in that. You can, anyone who wants to go to that can go to that.
Okay.
My professional opinion is an EIS probably isn't warranted, but you know,
Oh,
that's neither here nor
I don't
there.
disagree with that either, but I would support a motion
Yeah.
to.
If I may,
approve
I
that
think
lead
it's very clear, our approvals tonight. I would suggest that the chairs draft the resolution as we've heard it, And
Which one?
we
We are having two resolutions.
Yeah, we're on the
Yeah,
second,
yeah,
we've already
so-
voted for the first one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And that as appropriate for with the community board. I mean, that we just voted, all of us unanimously, I think, to approve
The building.
the building,
Daria and
exactly.
Natasha, why don't you conduct this part? Yeah.
So
The landscape.
Yeah, exactly, because I thought what you were saying had merit and the way to do it, so I would think that the chairs could draft a great deal, all of it, of the unanimity that we have expressed here to submit then to the full board. Because we have the vote, and let's then move on, because there's another item on the agenda. And a good job has been done.
Yeah, so the vote that we just took, that was
The
simply
building,
for
exactly.
the building,
And the
right?
general
Yeah.
approval.
General approval. So for the landscaping part, in general, we are in favor of it. One thing that we would put in there, these are recommendations.
Yes.
They would not be conditional on
Okay.
approving anything. One recommendation would be for the Parks Department, CPC, to really work to save as many trees as possible.
I would just push,
Which is, you know, a lot of them are very old, tall elm trees.
Beautiful.
We're not telling them how to do their
No.
jobs. We're just,
I just want to, this is something actually I care about a lot. I don't think there are, and we can ask, I don't think there are any elm trees in this section. This section, because of the fact of how the park has been reconfigured and that it's next to a new wing, these are relatively young trees for Central Park. They're not part of the original Olmsted landscaping, and I don't think there are any American elms here. So I would actually say these are relatively less important trees.
Well,
So
I mean, I think, learned differently, and I want to make sure.
well, yeah, maybe we can just.
Regardless, it's not contingent on it, so
Yeah.
even if there's a slight chance that there are beautiful elms that are older and these trees are older, we can ask them to revisit it and just to see if there's a possibility to save it or move it or do,
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be just an elm, just for the sake of an
Yeah.
elm. You know, I
But
think
mature
removing
Whatever,
trees.
yeah.
And I understand that we're getting 40 trees in exchange, but I think it sounds like there's some sort of a calculation by which you give up some and then you get some. So if it's possible, we would like to put that language in. It is not, we are not making it contingent on the approval of the resolution at all.
Right.
I would propose that exactly what has been said now, that be included in 2 sentences or whatever, in that expression of interest and concern, and we have a resolution that can be written, and we have already voted for it. You'll send to us the text before the board meeting, just so that we know what is going to go to the board meeting.
We didn't vote on the.
We haven't voted on the
I'm saying when we vote for the park. I'm just trying to move it. Let's get one thing and then we know we're going to be dealing with the park.
You always write the greatest.
The greatest, they're excellent.
You do, and they're always eloquent, now it's great.
So this is all very good. Let's move on.
Okay.
Onward.
Thank you.
It's
Do you want
10 after 8.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Adam,
All right.
Do you want to give us?
So should we vote for the landscaping?
Yes.
For everything?
I'll accept the condition of the
Yes.
trees.
All right.
Sure.
It's not a condition.
Sorry, the suggestion for the trees.
It's a concern or
Yeah.
recommendation. Okay, will
Okay,
you
yeah.
ask us to
She's got
vote?
the language. They have
Okay.
lovely language.
Yes, you will do.
So
Okay.
calling the question
All in favor, already.
around landscaping,
Okay, so same vote.
same one.
Okay, excellent.
0 to 0 to 0.
Thank you.
7 to 0 to 0 to
And you'll draft the.
We'll draft the landscaping one, we'll share it.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We will get these resolutions. We will look at them as a full board in April, and we will have them before LPC in time for your meeting. Thank you so much for all coming. Thank you, Frida. Thank you, everyone.
Always good to
We
see
really
you.
appreciate
We
spending
know
your
that the
evening with
museum
us.
is part of the Upper West Side, whichever.
Fifth Avenue is the dividing line, so it's west. It's on the west side.
Thank you. We'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Also a lot more positive. Remember what we went through with the Gilder Center? Good Lord. Oh, God. Were you guys here with the Gilder Center?
You guys are welcome to skip this section. If you want to hang out around and talk about windows on a building we've talked about 5 times in the last 4 years, you're welcome to join us. I think it's 4 in 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pleading for you. You're free to go.
Rounding up.
Nice.
To kids, almost.
It's almost 8. I gotta, it's after 8.
No, rounding up.
Okay, so.
All right, excellent. So we're gonna move on to the next application this evening, which is 400 West End Avenue, a very important building where I spent my early years.
Is there a plaque?
There's no plaque yet, but maybe in the future. So if you want to share screen and begin, thank you.
Do you know when you'll be able to send the draft? Or...
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thanks for your time. And my name's Ryan. I'm a sales representative and a project manager for Panorama Windows. And as you said, we are proposing to replace 4 windows on the primary facade, the south facade facing West 79th Street of 400 West End Avenue. So here's a location plan, so you can see the exact location of the building and our scope of work, window location. And as you noted, this has been done in the past, so I'm actually going to preface this presentation by showing 2 recent permits that were issued in 2023. Same scope of work, both went through community board and public hearing. Both were passed and issued permits, and I have them here as reference. This is apartment 17 CD, where 1/1 double hung windows were approved that go against the historic configuration. And permit number 2 is for apartment 7A. Same scope of work. They replaced 11 1/1 windows in kind. 4/1. Okay, moving on to our window schedule. It is confirming 4 windows with a exterior finish bronze to match the rest of the building, as well as previous approved window specs. And this is circling in this lower section here, the location of those 4 windows up close. Again, they're on the 3rd floor of the primary south facade. Next photos show the primary West End Avenue facade, which our work is not taking place, but for reference, we wanted to show the other primary. And then the next photo is the south, which we are working on. As you can see, there is an abundance of 1/1 double hung windows. So we are kind of keeping the same existing look, not changing anything. I myself have personally scoped the building out a couple times, and I've not come across any visible historic windows in this building. So there isn't really any historic precedents. There haven't been any historic configuration replacements. Anything that has been changed has been 1/1, which obviously goes against historic. Next page is our window elevations showing the existing 1/1 double hung windows replacing in kind, and we have the masonry opening dimensions and the window size dimensions all here for reference. We have interior photos of the windows and exterior photos. And the last couple pages are just our installation section details. On the left, you see the existing aluminum replacement double hung window installed within the original steel master frame. And to the right is our aluminum double hung window going what's called a brick to brick installation, taking out all framing, applying waterproofing and parging and repairing the masonry opening to make sure we do the most efficient installation method. And that is our vertical section detail. And lastly, our horizontal detail. Up top, you have the aluminum double hung window existing, installed within the steel frame. And then our proposed aluminum double hung window installed with waterproofing and stainless steel straps within the inner wall construction. And on the exterior, we're replacing the old aluminum trim with new aluminum trim, but with a smaller profile, less bulky, actually more consistent with original steel framing. So it's more of a historic look, although it's a different material. But so that's the exterior component there that you see.
Hey,
do you give more of a close-up of these windows compared to windows that are near them? And are these the same windows that you put on the 17th floor last year?
The other projects were not done by Panorama Windows, but they are the same type of window, material and configuration. They were aluminum double hung 1/1 windows, so no muntin grids, with a bronze exterior finish. So we're matching that style, so it's consistent with the building.
So the historic ones had muntins, but none of them do anymore.
That's correct. So back to this page, I'm sorry if it's a little small, but this center black and white photo is the historic tax photo from the 1940s. And I'm happy to share it by request, so it's easier to see. But what you'll see if you zoom in to that photo is the original steel casement windows that are in multiple sections with divided lights, etc. So they're, much different than what exists today. But yeah, that's the original historic configuration there that you're looking at.
Klari?
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is for you, Adam.
Yeah.
In your youth, which of course was moments ago.
One over one.
Was there a time when there were still any of the originals, do you know?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. And was there at some point an overall building replacement with the 1/1s?
No.
That are now
Based on the history of all of these buildings, I assume it was done like once it went co-op or something.
Yeah,
they did all
that
of
would be
them.
typical. But,
Yeah. So I don't remember any of the casement, but also I moved when I was 4.
But
so
there's not an approved window plan.
I assume. Do we have other
No,
questions for the? Yeah.
There's not currently an approved master plan. I've proposed that to the shareholder I'm working with and asked him to present it to the board. I've also proposed it to the building super. The feedback that I've gotten from them is that the building is, for whatever reason, very against doing a master plan. But in my opinion, for the wrong reasons. I don't think that they understand fully the benefits of a master plan. So I've offered my time to come in and speak to everyone there in the building, the board, and whoever else would like to be present on what we would do for a proposed master plan and the benefits of that. So future shareholders during replacement projects don't have to go through public hearing.
Yeah, in the long run, it saves money and time.
Any other questions, or should we chat?
Yeah, I'm for
All right.
it. I'm for it.
Resolution to approve as presented. All right.
Here.
All right.
And I guess the recitation would be that there are no original configurations still existing in the building.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining
Do you have
us.
a date for landmarks or?
Yeah, April 8th is the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
No one from the public, right? Just want to make sure.
Jesse, no one from the public?
I don't know if we're still on Jesse.
Oh.
Another matter. You
Yeah.
remember that woman who came
Okay,
in
thank you.
Thanks.
twice about her windows on 72nd Street? She never showed up at LPC for the hearing.
What? Wait, no, wait a minute. What do you mean twice?
Also, just
The most recent one.
I don't see you on.
Thank you, Ryan.
You April 8th. Okay, that's
The
fine.
most
It's not
recent
posted
one
yet.
that we approved and
Yeah.
LPC
I was checking April 1st. April 8th isn't posted. Okay, you're all
So
set.
we're
Thank
hearing
you.
it again.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay,
But
and
LPC
then,
approved,
sorry,
I thought.
Klari, before that, one final item, new
Yeah.
business.
Oh.
We will be hearing from Bricks and Mortals at our April meeting. They're an organization that looks at basically the bricks, the buildings, and the mortals, religious groups. So they're going to come talk to us about some of the challenges that religious groups are having maintaining their historic structures. and some, legislation that is floating around that may or may not help them.
So I think we also have to be a little bit proactive. I don't know if there's anything we could possibly do in relation to the Central Park, the Park West Presbyterian
Well,
Church
I
on
was about to
86th
ask
Street.
about that. I read something the other day saying that scaffold was coming down, and I didn't understand.
They have to do some work before that scaffolding comes down. I think they have enough money to, or at least they
Well,
presented
so
that. at a
here's my
meeting.
suggestion. At some point, if we want to put West Park on the agenda, let's put it on the agenda and have a conversation. But for now, motion to adjourn.
There's a lot to be
I had it on the
said.
agenda 20 years ago.
All right, great. I'm gonna end this meeting. So,
We're good?